Welcome everybody to TechCraft, this is Rob, and in today's video we're going to talk about building custom browser extensions for Safari on iOS. Let's go. So I really think that Safari on iOS is a great browser, and I think this is especially true for Safari on iPadOS. However, the big restriction that I face is there's no way to install custom browser extensions that I use in Safari on the desktop. Thankfully though, using shortcuts, we can build our own browser extensions, and in this video we'll see how. I'm going to put all the shortcuts that we build up on Shortcuts Gallery, and I'll put a link to that in the description below so you can download them if you want, but I do encourage you to follow along and try and build them for yourself. That way you'll figure out if you want to tweak things or maybe improve them for your own use case. Let's dive straight in with the first shortcut, which is our own custom URL shortener. So for this demo, I'm going to use tinyurl as the URL shortener. You can use any URL shortening service that you want, but tinyurl is super easy to integrate with shortcuts. Let's find out how. Let's start by taking a look at the anatomy of a shortcut that we want to use as a Safari extension. Let's dive into shortcuts and see that in action. So here I am, I'm going to create a new shortcut, and the first thing I want to do is click on these three dots, and I'm going to deselect Showing Widget. This is not a shortcut that will appear in the homepage widget. This is a shortcut that's going to appear in the share sheet inside Safari. So we deselect Showing Widget, we do select Show in Share Sheet, and then what we need to do here is come into the share sheet types and deselect all. And as a minimum, we need to select Safari web pages. This is what will allow our shortcut to be used to share, to extend a Safari web page inside Safari. Because this is a URL shortener, the other thing I'm going to do is actually select URLs, and this can allow our shortcut to work in more places. And if you have a particular shortcut that you're building that can do web pages, maybe PDFs, URLs, you should make it work for all of those content types. But this one, it really only makes sense for web pages and for URLs. So that's the details of the shortcut complete there. Just give it a name. I'm just going to call it shorten. I won't bother with the icon at this time. So that's that. So then let's get into the basics of how we actually call the tinyurl API and shorten the URL for a Safari web page. How I want to approach this is I want to start by creating a variable that will hold the URL to be shortened. And I can do that by searching for set variable in here in the search app. Click that. And I'm going to call it the URL, and I'm just going to set it to the shortcut input for now. And what I want to do is if that shortcut input is already a URL, I'll just leave it as it is. If it's not a URL, that means it will be a Safari web page. We'll extract the URL from the Safari web page and then shorten that. So to find out the type of thing that's been passed in, to find out the type of this variable, we can use the get type action. I'm going to bring that in. So if we get the type of the URL, that will tell us is it a Safari web page or a URL. Then we can use an if statement to make a decision based on that type. So here I've got if type, I'm going to say is, and I want the value to be Safari web page. If you're a programmer, you'll probably be cringing at this moment thinking that this is the way to check for the type, but this is how you do it in shortcuts. Now, what I want to do here is if the type is a Safari web page, so if we fall into this block, I'm going to extract the URL, and if it's not, I want to do nothing. And I'm just going to signal that we want to do nothing in that block by using the nothing action. I'm going to drag that into there. You don't have to do that, that's completely optional, but it is a nice thing to just signify that you're intentionally doing nothing in your shortcut. But let's get back to the body of the actual URL itself. We can use the get details from Safari web page action, drag that into here. Click on the detail parameter and choose what detail you want. You can see there's quite a few things here. I want that to be page URL. Now, notice that when dragged this in, it says get page URL from type. That's definitely not what we want. Type isn't the variable holding the Safari web page. It's the shortcut input. So we need to click on that, click clear to get rid of it, choose select magic variable. That brings up this cool little graph here of all of the things, and then we can click on the shortcut input, which we know is a Safari web page. Right, so we've got the page URL now. We now need just to stash it in our variable. So I want another set variable action here. Bring that down into there. And I'm going to call that the URL. So when we get to the end of this if block now, what we'll have is the variable called the URL will either have the URL that was passed in as the shortcut input, or it will have the URL of a Safari web page that was passed in as the shortcut input. So now we're ready to call the tinyurl API. Let's see how to do that. To call a third-party API, what we're going to do is use the get contents of URL action in shortcuts. Let's see how. So So I'm going to grab a get contents of URL and pull that down to here. And now we just need the URL of the API endpoint at tinyURL. We don't pass in our URL directly. We have to say to tinyURL at their particular API endpoint what URL we want them to shorten. So I'm just going to quickly do that. And the first thing I need to do is get rid of this if result here. So notice if you click on it, there's often not a clear button. If you press the keyboard though, you get the option to delete it with your keyboard. Now I'm just going to type in the basic URL here for the endpoint, which is this, and we need to choose what URL we want to pass as the URL parameter in the API. So I can just click the URL here, and this may work, but it won't work always. And the reason why it won't always work is that the URL parameter we're passing in will have special characters, and those special characters need to be encoded so that we can actually pass one URL as part of another URL. And this is called URL encoding, and there's a shortcut action for this. Let's see how. So what I want to do is grab the URL encode action here. I'm going to drag that in between like that. And I want to URL encode the variable that we had before, which was the URL. I need to use my keyboard here to clean this up. URL encode the URL. And what I want to do now is change this in our network call to not be that variable, the URL, but to be the output of this. And if you're unsure which of these is the output of this, press the magic wand and you'll see that it's actually this one coming from there. So now we're going to call get contents of this API endpoint, passing in the encoded URL. When this API call succeeds, what it will do is just pass back as text the encoded URL. And I want to do two things with it. The first thing I want to do is copy it to the clipboard, and then I want to send out a notification saying that it has been copied to the clipboard so that we know the shortcut has finished. So to copy things to the clipboard, we can just use a clipboard action, copy to clipboard, drag that down here, and it's just going to copy the contents of this URL to the clipboard. That's totally fine. Next thing is to send the notification. We type in notification, we get show notification here as an action, and you can construct whatever you want here. I want this to be shortened URL and then the actual response, which was this. And I might just add some extra text at the end, copied to clipboard. And you can see that we can do this quite a nice pattern, and we've got some text that we want in the notification, and we've got a variable here that we want in the notification as well. This works perfectly well. So that's the shortcut complete. Let's now try it out in Safari. Okay, so here I am in Safari, and to use our extension, all we'll do is click on the sharing button up here. We will scroll down and we will click on shorten. The first time you run this, you'll be prompted to give the shortcut permission to actually run, and then eventually it will complete and you get your notification here. If I open up a new tab now and paste into that tab, you can see there is my shortened URL, and if I go to it, you'll see it brings up the original web page. So I find this shortcut really, really useful, and I really like the fact that you can drive third-party APIs from directly within Safari. This opens up a ton of power and a ton of opportunities for building really interesting extensions to Safari iOS. Let's now see how we can actually integrate and mess around with the page content in Safari to do something very useful that I like to do a lot, which is block annoying page content. Okay, so here I am back in Safari, and I have a page open at The Independent, which is a UK news website, and I'm not picking on The Independent in particular, but this is something that just constantly frustrates me. If you go to many of their articles, they start the article with an autoplay video, and the actual text you want to read is all the way down here. Kind of annoying. Now, of course, I could use reader mode, but there are often things on the page that I want to stay there that go when using reader mode. What I really just want to do is get rid of the video. Let's see how we can do that with a shortcut. So we'll come back into shortcuts and create a new shortcut, and we'll follow the same archetype that we did before. Say no to show in the widget, yes to show in the share sheet, and choose as the input a Safari web page. Perfect. And we're just going to call this one clear out video. So it's surprisingly easy to strip out the video content on this web page. We need just one shortcut action, and that action is the run JavaScript one. So let's take a look at that. So I'm going to search for run JavaScript here and run JavaScript on web page. And yes, I want the thing we run the JavaScript on to be the shortcut input, because we know that that is a Safari web page. And there's a default one here, but we're just going to clear that out. I'm going to press Command A and delete that. So the first thing we need to do is to find the elements on the page that are the video elements. Now I know the tag name for that. I found that using my MacBook. I use the inspect function in Safari. Now there's no inspect function built into Safari on iOS, which is kind of frustrating, but there are some apps on the App Store that you can use for this if you really want to, and I will link them in the description below. But I did this on the MacBook, and I happen to know that the tag name is amp-brightcove. Now once I've got those elements, I'm going to iterate over them using a little for loop here. And then inside that for loop, all I want to do is get the element at each index and remove it. And then once that's done, the final thing you have to do in every one of these shortcuts is call the completion function. This just signals to the shortcuts extension that you are complete with your processing. So we'll just call completion like that, and we're done. This is the extent of this shortcut. So we can click done and we can try it out. So we're back in Safari, and I'm going to strip out this annoying video element. Click on the share option, scroll down, and choose clear out video. You have to give it permission to run, click allow, it'll do its business, and then look, there goes the video element. I can now read my article in peace without being bothered. And of course you can do any transformation you want to the page here. You've got a full JavaScript environment directly in the page that you're viewing in Safari, and you can make any transformation to it that you want. Obviously you have to run this every page, and that might be fine. You might occasionally want to watch the videos. Sometimes on this page they're kind of interesting. If you want a more permanent content blocking solution, something that scales to a lot more pages and does so automatically, I have a solution for that as well, not involving shortcuts, but throw a comment below if you want to see how that works. It is kind of useful. So let me now show you one of my most favorite shortcuts that I use in Safari, and that is the Send to Kindle shortcut. Now, if you have the Kindle app installed on the iPad, you may have tried to send an article to your Kindle using this app, and you may have been disappointed. Let's see why it doesn't work. So here I am back in Safari with the article we were playing with before, and I'm going to click on the share extension, and I will scroll across here to the Kindle and click on that. And yep, I've got a send to Kindle option, and click send, and we'll switch over to the Kindle and see what happens. What you'll notice though when this comes through is that you get this really disappointing web extraction failed. The set of things that you can actually send to the Kindle successfully from Safari is tiny, and it's really hard to know in advance whether or not it's going to work. Thankfully, we can build a lot better Send to Kindle extension using shortcuts. Let's see how. So we'll start by creating a new shortcut, and we'll follow the basic template from before. Deselect showing widget, select showing share sheet, and from the share sheet types, we will deselect them all and then choose Safari web pages. Perfect. So what I really want to do is, if I'm viewing a PDF in Safari, I want that PDF to go straight to the Kindle as it is. But if I'm not, I want to format the content in a way that the Kindle can read and then send it over. Let's see how. The first thing is I'm going to get the URL of the web page, and we'll use the get details of Safari web page that we saw earlier, and click on detail and choose page URL. Now, I'm going to use something kind of hokey, but it seems to work for me, which is I'll just check if the file extension in the URL has PDF at the end of it. To get the path of the URL, we can use get components of URL. This will allow us to get the individual pieces from our URL. And rather than scheme, which is the bit at the front, I want the path. You could try and just look for PDF inside the URL, and that might work occasionally, but sometimes you'll find PDF at the start of a domain name or something like that. So this is a lot smarter. This will actually check if the file name, the path name, ends in PDF. Now, to check if we have PDF at the end, we'll use if, and we'll bring an if statement in here, and we want to say if component URL ends with PDF. So now if we have that, what we want to do is just grab the raw bytes of that PDF and have that as the content we're going to send to the Kindle. And we can do that using get content of URL, as we saw earlier. Put that in here, and we just want to use the page URL that was passed in here. So you have to be really careful of this. When you drop something into a shortcut, it's not particularly smart at picking out the right thing to be the input of that new action. So I'm going to clear that out. With the keyboard, I can delete that, and I want to choose this variable here. But again, click the magic wand and you can be sure and double check which variable it is that you want. So that's what we want in the if block. So get the page URL, get the path of that URL. If that path ends in PDF, then grab the contents of that PDF, and that will be the output from this whole block. If the path doesn't end in PDF, then what I want to do is use Safari Reader to grab a friendly looking content of the web page, and that's what I want to send to the Kindle. To do this, we'll use the get article action from Safari. So if I type into search here, get article, you've got a get article using Safari Reader. I'm going to chuck that in here. Now we have to pass in the URL here, and again, it's picked the wrong thing, so I'm going to clear that out and choose the page URL. It's not even appeared in the suggested variables this time, so use the magic wand and pick page URL like that. Brilliant. There is another way you can do that if you want. We can clear out the page URL. We can press shortcut input as the thing we want. Then if I click on this, I can actually just choose page URL directly there, and that will get the page URL attribute of the page and insert it into that action at that point. So there's a couple of different ways you can do this. So what we'll have now is the output of this if block will either be the PDF bytes or the article created by Safari Reader. Now to send this to the Kindle, I'm going to use the Send to Kindle feature, where you can basically email something to a special address that Amazon gives you and they will put the document on your Kindle. If you don't know how that works, I'll put a link to the documentation below. It's really simple. The email is set up for you by default and you just have to give your own private email addresses permission to send to it. Now to make that work, what we're going to do is we're first going to create a zip file from this content. So I'm going to choose the make archive action here, and I want to make a .zip archive from the result of this if block. So it will either have our PDF or our formatted article in that zip file. So once we've got that zip file, all that remains is to email it to Kindle, and that's really easy. We'll choose email here, and there's a send email action, and we'll drag that in. The message I want to be the archive, so that's this, and the recipients will be your particular Kindle address. Mine is robdharrop@kindle.com. You can try sending to that address if you want, but because you have permission, it won't work. Don't forget, to make this work, you have to give your addresses permission to send to that Kindle address. For the subject, we're going to set this to the word convert, and all this will do is tell Amazon that you want the contents of this archive converting into ebook format. So rather than just send the raw PDF or the raw HTML data to your Kindle, it will convert it into an ebook. This makes it far nicer to read on Kindle devices. It improves the experience in the Kindle app on the iPad for sure, but on a Kindle device, it's a much nicer experience to read something that is an actual ebook. So this is the basics of it. Let's try it out in Safari. But before we can do that, we actually have to save it. So I'm going to click next. I'm going to give it a name S2K for send to Kindle and click done. So we'll come back to Safari. I've got my article here. We're finally going to get it on the Kindle. Go into the share sheet, scroll down until we see the S2K action, and then click on that. So you do have to give it permission to the websites you want to send content from, but once you've given it permission to a particular website, that is remembered for the next time. Click OK. It will get the article, make the zip file, and it pops up this send window here that we can use to send, and I'm just going to click the send button there. And now that will go straight to my Kindle. Before we take a look at that though, let me just show you one tweak you can make to this shortcut to make it a little bit smoother. So if we go back into the shortcut here and open up the properties for that shortcut and scroll all the way down, little bug here, can't get to the options. What we have to do is drag in a nothing action at the bottom, and that brings this up so I can now see it, and I want to expand show more. And if you unselect the show compose sheet, and then add into from one of the addresses that you've given Amazon permission to receive from, then you won't get that little compose sheet pop up. It will automatically send the content to your Kindle. I think that if you're using this extension a lot, that's a really nice feature. If you're just getting used to it and you want to make sure you're comfortable with what it does, then leave the compose sheet popping up. But once you've used it a few times and you get comfortable with it, you'll definitely want to turn that off and make it be direct send. So let's switch over now to the Kindle app and see what happens. So here you can see I've got my article, press on that, go into it, and there, it's way better than what Amazon sent us, which was essentially nothing. It's not perfect. There are a few little issues here with encoding, but it's much, much better. And it didn't take very long to build that. That was like, 9 actions in a shortcut to build something that I think is quite useful for me every day. So the next time you find yourself really in need of a particular Safari extension that isn't on the iPad or on the iPhone, just take a quick look at shortcuts and see what you can put together. I think you'll find you can do a lot more than you perhaps initially imagine. We've seen that you can call third-party APIs, you can format content, you can create zip files, you can send emails, do all kinds of stuff. It's really quite a powerful system. If you found this video useful, if you found it entertaining, please do hit like, do hit subscribe, and don't just hit subscribe, but hit that bell as well so you don't miss out on any future content. There will be a shortcuts video coming every Sunday. If you have any suggestions for what shortcuts you'd like to see, throw a comment below. I've got plenty of things I want to do myself, but I'd love to hear from you the kinds of things that you're interested in seeing in these videos. Other than that, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.